Good evening. Hi, how's everyone? Good. All right. So welcome to tonight's talk, Earth and Human Climate Change History. I'm Bezanson. I'm the President Director of the Natural History Family of Museums, which oversees La Brea Tar Pits. How many of you have been to, well, actually I should say, how many of you went to the first one, not the last, but yeah, oh, look at you. Wow, okay, so you know everything already. No, not really. We're here for this great panel discussion. We're going to hear a little bit more about that in a few minutes. But I just want to reinforce that there's a reason why we're having it here, and that is because the La Brea Tar Pits and Museum, as I know all of you know, has the best and most complete record of life during the Ice Age. And it really tells the story of natural climate and ecological change. So it's a great backdrop for a very important topic that I know we're all interested in. I do want to also reinforce the notion, because I know you're all great ambassadors for us at the Tar Pits, that this is a true gem. This location, this active field site, this museum, the story that we have to tell is not just an LA story, it is a story for the world. And it is, of course, known for that. And we have wonderful attendance here from visitors around the world because it is a one-of-a-kind location. So it is the perfect place to do this kind of work that we have tonight. I do want to say that we are incredibly pleased to be partnering with UCLA's Institute of the Environment and Sustainability on this series. And I want to express my appreciation to IOES Director Peter Brea and his talented staff for helping us for co-organizing these events. Really, it's a great partnership, and we're delighted to be working with you. So as you know, those of you who came to the last one, this is the second event. We have more to come, and we look forward to seeing you there. Finally, I want to give a shout out to our NHM staff who collaborated on planning this event. Sue O, Vice President for Education and Public Programs. Laurel Robinson, Manager of Public Programs, ready to go on leave soon, right, Laurel? Where are you, Laurel? Yeah, she's back there. You should be sitting down. She's been working very hard to get this series ready for her soon departure, but she'll be back. So thank you, Laurel, for all your work on this. Also, Gabe Schoberg, our program manager, and of course, our fabulous staff at La Brea Tar Pits and Museum. So I just want to express my appreciation to all of them and to all of you for being here tonight. So now let me introduce to all of you Dr. Peter Brea.
Terrific. You have to admit this is a fabulous place. The only reason I'm a scientist is because my dad used to take me to the Museum of Natural History in New York. I wouldn't be a scientist otherwise. And Yankee ball games, I should say. As already mentioned, we got together to do this climate series because climate's a big deal, except for a few individuals engaged in skullduggery and such things. We all know it's a big deal, but we're trying to take a little bit of different tone on it. You'll see through the evening. Is instead of it being a totally somber and depressing doom and gloom, make it a little bit more conversational, and it might seem inappropriate, but playful, because playful is a source of creativity. So the scientists we have tonight are scientists who study the long history of human history, anthropologists, or animal history, paleozoologists, paleoecologists. So that's the expertise they bring. And why are we taking this historical look? In my old job, I would be sent to states like Texas, Oklahoma, West Virginia to talk to hostile audiences about climate change. And one of the things that would always come up would be like, what's the problem? We've had ice ages before, the climate's always been changing, so, why stress? And I think we'll hear a little bit about the history, and we'll use the past to illuminate the future tonight. To get us going in the right mood, normally you're asked to put away your cell phone. Tonight, you take out your cell phone. And if you haven't already done this, get out your smartphone, connect to the Wi-Fi. That's the network up there. The password, appropriately, is My Tar Pits. And for your first polling question, some of you may have already done this, the first polling question is enter one word, just one word that describes, let's keep it clean. And the first one, the word is
Too late.
oh, okay. Well, now it's certainly appropriate for me to introduce our MC for the night, because this reflects her character. No, it doesn't. We'll have her talk about it. We'll do more of this. But to sort of host the whole evening is my favorite anthropologist of all time. She's an artist, expert in pop culture, terrific scientist, radiant teacher, and chairman of the Department of Anthropology at Santa Clara University, the thoroughly modern Dr. Michelle Bezanson, and she's going to run the show and explain the game.
Yes. So thank you. I just want to do another plug for events like this. I was telling Peter last night that my parents used to take me to events like this at the University of Arizona, and it was pretty much the first time I got access to these kinds of ideas, because believe it or not, the elementary school education in Tucson, Arizona wasn't talking about anthropology or human evolution. So I encourage you to bring your kids or steal somebody else's kids to bring them to events like this. I mean, politely ask your neighbors to borrow. They'll probably be ready to give them up. So as Peter mentioned, we're going to do a game. It's going to be Family Feud style. Has anyone watched Family Feud? You know what it is? There's an old one where there's Richard Dawson who awkwardly kissed people. And now there's a newer one with Steve Harvey. So we're going to do that, but first I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about the people that are sitting up here. You already know who I am. I'm Michelle Bezanson. I'm a biological anthropologist and a primatologist. And in my work, I focus on primate locomotion and primate ecology in capuchin monkeys, like the one that was in Friends. Don't have a pet monkey. Howler monkeys and spider monkeys. And as Peter said, in my spare time, I do some illustration. When I realized you could have a job doing things like running around in forests and looking for monkeys, I then realized there's a reason to wake up in the morning. But if I hadn't done that job, I would want to do Emily's job. So I'll talk a little bit about what Emily does. I'm the only one that gets notes, so I'm lucky. She is a paleoecologist, an assistant curator, and excavation site director here at La Brea Tar Pits and Museum. She studies how climate change and human activities intersect to impact ecosystems. She's written about giant ground sloths, too, which is really cool. So she was probably into sloths before Kristen Bell had that meltdown on the Ellen Show. She just recently published a paper in Science where she and her co-authors argue that we should combine novel and historical conservation landscape information to understand which species and ecosystems require human intervention, how we adjust to rapid climate change, and how ecosystem variation varies in both the short and the long term. So that's Emily Lindsey. Next to Emily is Agustín Fuentes. He's a biological anthropologist and primatologist, just like me. And he is at the University of Notre Dame. He was just recently named the Reverend Edmund P. Joyce CSC. That must be a religious thing, yeah, okay. Endowed chair in anthropology. And this is a really important status, a very prestigious thing for your university to recognize your accomplishments in this way. Do you get a free chair?
No.
Oh, you should get a cool chair. He studies cooperation and bonding in human evolution. He's also an ethnoprimatologist, and ethnoprimatologists combine methods from cultural anthropology and from biological anthropology to examine the human primate versus non-human primate interface. So it's a really cool combination of techniques. And he applies interdisciplinary approaches to human nature. He also has a new book out, probably available at Amazon or any of the other local booksellers. The book is titled The Creative Spark: How Imagination Made Humans Exceptional. What he does in this book is he reviews the many facets of our evolutionary past to argue that it is cooperation with others, collaboration, creativity, and imagination that sets humans apart from other species. So we're pretty lucky we have them. So now what I'm going to do is ask each of the panelists 2 questions about their work so that they can explain it in their words, which will be much better than my words. So I'm going to ask Emily first. What would you tell a high school age student about how your research helps us understand the world today?
So I'm lucky in that I have the incredible resources of the low Brea tar pits here at my fingertips. And as Laurie alluded to, this is basically one of the only places on Earth where you can see an entire ecosystem moving through time. And that's a very special time period that it's moving through. It's moving through a period of the last major episode of global warming, the arrival of humans on the North American continent, and the extinction of about 80% of the large mammals from this ecosystem. And so today, there's a lot of talk about how these 3 factors, humans, climate change, and extinction, are going to affect our world and are going to affect natural populations. And this is one of the only places where we can really look and have a comprehensive view of what happened in the past in the face of these 3 factors.
Great. Augustine, same question. What would you tell a high school age student about how your research helps us understand the world today?
I would tell them I get paid to chase monkeys and people across the planet in jungles, across mountaintops, and urban environments. If you want to do something like that, you actually have to pay attention to what they're talking about in biology class and in history class. You have to think and understand how organisms and ecosystems work on the planet. And we actually know a good deal about this. And if you don't pay attention to that, you're not going to get to do what you want when you grow up.
Okay. Sign me up. Okay, next question. And this is the last question for this part. There'll be more questions for Family Feud. Given that we have just experienced a number of disasters and human suffering, what is one thing that you have learned from your work that suggests we can be optimistic about the future? Emily?
So as a paleontologist, the one thing that sort of brings us hope is that we take the long view of things. And, in more than 500 million years of history of life on Earth, life has always survived. There have been major catastrophes, and we want to avoid major catastrophes to the extent possible, but there have also been remarkable success stories of adaptation and survival. And as humans, and maybe Agustín will talk to this, we have the creative ability and imagination and capacity to supersede some of these immense challenges if we have the will.
Okay, Agustín, same question.
Ditto. No. So I've spent about the last 25 years, in addition to chasing monkeys, looking at human past, the deep past, the last 2 million years of our histories. And what I've found again and again when we look at the fossil record, when we look at the different hypotheses that are supported and those that are just asserted about how things happened in human evolution, when we look at what has made us the last hominin standing, everything else like us went extinct, except for us. What was it? 2 million years ago, if you go back to our ancestors, they were about this tall. They were naked, fangless, hornless, clawless, had a couple rocks and a few sticks. What did they have? How did they make it in the world when there were a bunch of things like, there are a bunch of saber-toothed tigers and dire wolves and things like that out there, much bigger than them, ready to eat them? They had each other. They had each other, and over the last 2 million years, humans have again and again shown a remarkable ability to cooperate, to collaborate, to imagine not just what's in front of them, but something totally new, and to at least try to make that into reality. There's wonderful hope for humans in that context from our past and looking to our future. But remember, that same imagination that got us here and that's made us live is also destroying the planet and many other humans. And so just being wonderfully collaborative and imaginative is not enough. We also have to will to hope, to change, and to do it right, as opposed to do it wrong.
Okay, so we're going to move on to this game. So I'm going to put out a few ground rules here and explain how we set this up. We set out a questionnaire or survey to 100 people. Some were college students and then some other people. I don't know if any of you might have received it. Perhaps you answered some of these questions. And then we have 6 questions where they answered, and we ranked the top 5 answers from most popular to least popular. And what the panelists are going to do is guess what the survey respondents said. But it's not just them doing this. You all get to do this as well. So in your phone, you will have an opportunity to submit the answer that you think these survey respondents answered as well. So you get to do the same thing. So you get to play along. So what we'll do is we'll read the question, and then some music will play for 20 seconds. And then as that music fades, then we're going to move on with the game. This is a competition. And so you might notice that there's a crown here. That isn't what I wear in my everyday life, and I just brought it. This is the winner, the person with the most points, or we're going with the most points, will have to wear that in their job for the next week. So you can take it off to shower. It's the rules. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Everyone joined the Wi-Fi. They joined the Wi-Fi here, and you've got your phone all set up. So I guess we can go ahead and begin with the first question. The question: name one human trait that is unique to humans and key to our success over other species. Okay, we flipped a coin backstage, back over there somewhere, and Emily won the coin toss, and since she's got kind of the home court advantage here, she elected for Augustine to go first. So, Augustine, what do you think the survey respondents said?
Well, I hope some of them read my book. I'm going to say imagination.
Yes. So creativity, ingenuity, and innovation, all up there. So now you can keep going.
A big brain.
Nice work. Did you read your book too?
Long time ago. It didn't work out so well. I think I'm going to be wrong on this one, but a lot of people say this, and they're both right and wrong when they say it. Our ability to be very cruel or violent. Good, I'm glad that didn't show up.
Emily, do you want to take one guess?
Culture or society?
Help us out, folks.
Okay, so why don't we just show all of the answers?
Oh, language, duh. Oh. Well, I have always said that we should be really, really thankful that orcas don't have thumbs. If they did, we'd be in trouble.
Well, and so, Emily, you were right in many ways, because many of these things up here are our culture. And so when we think about how we might adjust to future climate change, we can think about cultural adjustment, things like it gets too hot, you take off your clothes. Or we can think of biological adaptation. And we know with humans that we have really cool biological adaptations for dealing with heat, like sweating. I love sweating. Urine concentration, I'm not as passionate about that. Bipedal walking and loss of body hair and things like that. So, Augustine, I wanted to ask you, in studying human evolution, how do we know this? Will we adapt biologically to current heat?
Well, that's a really good question, because a lot of people imagine human futures with us with big giant heads, right? Our brains getting bigger. All the women in the audience, especially those who've had children, know this is not going to happen. Our heads aren't getting any bigger. Our brains maxed out about 500,000 years ago and actually have gotten smaller, but that's okay. And we have a pretty consistent pattern of heat reduction. We're fairly naked. We sweat a lot. And we're pretty strange for mammals in that sense. What kind of things could we do in the future to adapt to increasing temperatures or increasing fluctuations, really hot and really cold? Almost all of that's going to be culture. It's going to be manipulating the world around us by clothing, by heating, by other means to challenge the environment by adding stuff between us and it, not by changing our bodies. Our bodies might shift a little bit, but really what you see is what we've had for about 300,000 years, maybe a little bit more. So I think it's working okay for us. The culture stuff adds on and allows us to interface in novel ways.
And then, Emily, I want to ask you, what have we learned about mammalian responses to heat?
So in the face of major changes, mammals and other animals basically have three options. You can adapt, you can move, or you can go extinct. And all of these things have happened many times over mammalian history. And so in the face of, even just the most recent climate changes that we're experiencing now, we see some mammals have moved. The pikas may be the first mammal to go extinct because of climate change, because the only place they've got to move is up the slopes of mountains, and eventually they get to the tops of the mountains and there's nowhere else to go. But we also see other sorts of changes where mammals have adapted over slightly longer periods of climate change. We see changes in tooth morphology related to aridity and wetness, and we see changes in body size in relation to cold and heat. And so there's certainly adaptive capacity in mammals. The problem with the current situation is that climate is changing so much faster than it ever has at any point in geologic or evolutionary time, that most scientists fear that very few mammals, which tend to have longer generation times than, say, insects, are not going to be able to keep up fast enough. And without the help of human ingenuity to physically move mammals to other places or to physically modify other places to keep them areas under conditions where certain species can continue to survive, a very large number are going to go extinct.
Let me jump in really quickly to point out that humans are mammals, just to remind everyone, and that something very important about mammals, I think that Emily just pointed out, is that there's this sort of pattern of morphological adaptation, right? Body size, structure, and behavior, and ranging patterns. Humans have done that very, very well. We're the most widespread large-bodied mammal on the planet. And so currently, one of the ways in which humans deal with climate change is that we share 99.9% of our genome, all humans, right? We're very, very homogeneous genetically compared to most other mammalian groups with distributed populations. We, humans, range from about populations that are about this tall to populations about this tall to over 200% difference in body weight. We are incredibly morphologically variable, so we have a sort of reservoir of biological variation in humans that allows us to move around a lot. So not only are we good at using extrasomatic stuff that's not our body to deal with the challenges, but we actually have an enormous amount of variation. We are a highly plastic mammalian species.
Yeah, and we'll revisit some of this topic in the future questions. There's some related content. So we're going to move on to question 2. The question is, what large mammal should we let go extinct in order to invest in others? invest in the pica. Save the pica. It's your turn, Emily.
Okay, well, I know Augustine's answer, but I don't. I don't think it's going to be up there. I'm going to guess someone said humans.
Of course.
Nice.
However,
I'm going to guess there were some vegetarians that said cows.
boo, cows. I love cows.
Nice work.
I'm going to guess there were some, practical but maybe heartless people that chose a highly endangered species like rhinos.
And she's never seen Family Feud.
I'm going to guess that some people thought, well, if we let one animal go extinct that's can prove highly economically lucrative, like elephants, maybe we can fund the resuscitation of other species?
There's that
So
panda.
mine was panda, but
Okay, and finally, there's got to be an animal that people don't like, although we're probably not trying very hard to save it. I was going to say like rats or something, but whales?
You want to take one guess?
you know,
there?
I was going to say whales because I thought people were being ironic or something, but I'm going to go with rats. Number one. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I know the answer, so I can't guess. Why don't we show the answer?
I didn't know that was an option.
You all are very nice.
Unicorns. I think we should let the unicorns go. I've had it.
So, Emily, I want to ask you with this question. What do we know about large mammal versus small mammal extinction events in the past?
So the time period I study is...
Is this your fault? Did you guys put the nut?
The time period I study is unique in that it's an extinction event.
Oh, I like the partisan nature of the responses.
It's an extinction event that was size biased, and this is not typical of other extinction events in Earth history, but the animals that you see displayed in this museum are displayed in this museum because they're like big and impressive and mostly gone. And that is a very unusual thing, that you would basically lop off one end of the body size spectrum in an extinction event. And there's a lot of discussion among scientists about why this is. And specifically, is this extinction more due to climate change, more due to human activity, due to some sort of synergistic impact? But if you look at it from sort of a more zoomed out perspective, you can see that very likely the extinction event that wiped out most of the things you think of when you think of the La Brea tar pits is the beginning of an ongoing extinction event that we are still in the middle of today. And if you look at the animals, the mammals that are most threatened today, those also tend to be the large-bodied mammals that we have left for a couple of reasons. One, they tend to have slower reproductive rates, they take longer to reproduce, they have fewer offspring, and they may also be sort of less able to adapt quickly because of this to new climate regimes, and also just maybe killed off faster. And also maybe sort of tastier and give more of a benefit in terms of effort expended if you're a small band of humans going out looking for dinner.
So, Augustine, we know after some big extinction events, we see a process called adaptive radiation. And when adaptive radiation happens, it's a really cool thing because we've studied this in the past. So can you explain a little bit about what adaptive radiation is? And if this is such a good thing, and the present is the key to the past and vice versa, do we have something to look forward to here?
Depending on who we are in this question. So in adaptive radiation, think of the world as a bunch of organisms and environments matching up. So there's different ways of being. There's a squirrel way, right? There's a dog way. There's a elephant way. We call these niches, right? So there are different ways in which organisms and their environments interact. And in many places, you see many of these niches are filled. And when extinction events happen, many of those organisms disappear, and those niches become open. And this is a great opportunity for evolutionary processes to use existing variation in the organisms that are out there to start filling those different niches. So we see these really cool expansions. In East Africa, we see the expansions of cichlid fishes, which is a sort of like tilapia thing, right? But they diversify into these huge range of things that have big mouths, small mouths, that chew on others' fins, that swim off and eat grass, and all of this sort of variation. From an evolutionary perspective, as an evolutionary biologist, we love adaptive radiations because you see evolutionary processes in action. It looks really cool, and you can use them to show people how evolution works. However, it's not really good or bad because the adaptive radiation is good in the sense of the clusters of species that have the adaptive radiation, but not for all the others that don't. And so thinking about this as value-laden is problematic. Yes, as things go extinct, we open the chances for adaptive radiation. But currently, if you look at what the patterns of extinction are globally and the patterns of habitat change and alteration largely imposed by anthropogenic processes, one might start asking, are those niches still there? So we might be in a place where it's not like a whole bunch of niches become open and other things fill them over the next 10 million years. It might be that we are taking away many of the niches for different kinds of things. So we may be in the process of reducing the possibility of adaptive radiations. And that, I would say, is bad.
Okay, and just to wrap up, I want to point out that the discussion of letting the panda go extinct has been written about a lot. In fact, there's a whole hashtag on Twitter that you can go to called #TheWorstBear. And you can learn more about what some mammalogists and primatologists think about the panda. Sorry.
You just depressed everyone in the room.
Sorry. But then we might be able to save the pikas. Okay, so
Not getting much pika love in here.
They're very cute. So moving on to the next question, what is the single most important technological innovation that allowed past humans to cope with environmental variability? I like to see Colin back there dancing to the music. So, Augustine, you go first this time.
There's so many, I don't know what everyone said, but let's start with fire.
Nice.
Tools, stone tools, hunting tools. Wow. People, tools are pretty important. Technology, just saying.
It wasn't them.
Just saying.
What do you think, Emily?
Man, if it's not tools, technological innovation, clothing.
iPhones?
Steel? Is that like metallurgy?
I think you get extra points for metallurgy. That's just.
You want to take one more guess?
Well, I'm trying to think of technology. I mean, tools covers pretty much all the technology. If someone said thumbs, I'm going to be upset. Important technological innovation. Written language?
Buzz. So let's show the answers. So some people, I think, were thinking a little more recently.
That's the problem when you're working in a 2 million year time depth. The air conditioning just didn't occur to me.
Our aqueducts.
Aqueducts, you're right, irrigation, yeah, oh right.
So thinking about Augustine's tool answer, tools are very important, and in human evolution, we had innovation that was pretty rare and sporadic, and so during our evolutionary history, we would invent a tool, and then perhaps years later modify that tool for new actions. And so these tools lasted quite a long time. Well, now we invent things all the time, and so you can, maybe a reasonable person could think, well, won't we just have an app to deal with this? So get out your phone and make it cooler. So, it's an important thing to think about how we invent with this question. So therefore, I wanted to ask Augustine, why is environmental variability an issue if we're so good at inventing things compared to the past?
That's a great question. Let me point out that everything up there is a tool, so I'm just saying. So environmental variability is really important in thinking about human evolution, and we think, well, we've just dealt with it, right? We always just deal with it. We had clothing, we have AC and fire and all these different kinds of things. What's not up there and what we don't think about usually when thinking about environmental variability is all of the populations over the last 2 million years of humans who went extinct. The vast majority of humans throughout our evolutionary history went extinct because stuff changed rapidly and they weren't able to respond. We are the last and most successful of that entire cluster, and we become better and better and better at adapting via tools and other means. But don't let that go to our heads. For most of our history, most populations of the genus Homo went extinct when things changed too quickly. And things are changing very, very quickly right now.
Can I add to that before you get to me? So we've just gone through like a really rough couple of months. Hurricanes and fires, all of which can be linked directly in some capacity to climate change. Now, dealing with change is hard, and dealing with more change is harder than dealing with less change. And I don't feel like we're doing a really good job of adapting instantaneously right now to the fact that how many scores of people have died just in the last summer due to climate-related events. And beyond that, all of the climate refugees, the Arab Spring can be directly tied to climate-related droughts that created economic insecurity. So anyone who says, oh, we'll just adapt our way out of it, I don't think we have time even to innovate our way out of this, because things are changing too fast and too many people are dying and too much economic prosperity is being lost right now.
So Emily, this is kind of a different spin on the technology question, but using technology, can we make up for our ecological sins by bringing back some of these creatures to the LA area?
Are you talking about de-extinction? So I was on a panel just about a year ago, right here, that was a de-extinction related panel. There are people who make ecological arguments that, a lot of these animals that we lost were major ecosystem engineers, like the relatives of elephants, like the ones standing behind me right there, or that maybe weren't big enough to be individually ecosystem engineers, but were so numerous, like the passenger pigeon, that they created, in a sense, didn't just respond to climate, but created climate. And so that's the argument, sort of the scientific or moral argument that's usually put forth to justify what I would say is basically gee whiz science. We could, but there was a study out pretty recently saying that if you wanted to put efforts into de-extinction, the amount of money and resources and time it would take to de-extinct one species, you could save 7 more species from going extinct. So I would say that is the best place to put our resources right now.
Did you want to add anything? Or?
No, I just think that's really important to point out that what Emily said is really, we have incredible technological and scientific capacities, but Jurassic Park is not possible. And the few things that have been floated about bringing back some species are so underwhelming, really, for the public. From a scientific perspective, they're fascinating. So I think in many cases, this whole discussion is taking away the focus of where we should be really is freaking out about the extinction crisis right now and what we could actually be doing.
And on top of that, I mean, you can bring back a mammoth, but where are you going to put it? Like, you don't have, we don't have mammoth ecosystems anymore, and you can't, as much as mammoths may be important, they can't like create their own ecosystem if you put 3 of them up in Siberia. And so the premise that a lot of people who make these types of arguments are using is that sort of tacitly, the climate hasn't changed, and the only reason these animals aren't around is because humans killed them all, and if we just put them back where they belonged, everything would be fine. And it doesn't work that way, and there are so many other species that either went extinct or moved that those species were interdependent with, that we can't, there's absolutely no way we can recreate that type of complex ecosystem. And with the amount of resources that would be spent on trying to do that, we could do a lot more benefit.
Okay, we're going to move on to the next question. Name an animal that has influenced the environment in a major way. And this is a non-human. Okay, Emily, is it your turn? Yeah.
Cows.
Nice. Next.
Coral.
See, that should get a point. That's just
Yeah.
really cool. So I can't help but staring across there at all of those dire wolf skulls. I'm thinking of carnivores or predators, so I'm going to say wolves. It has to be animal, right? Sure there's not a plant in there? Or like a blue-green algae?
No, that's
No.
not.
Just testing, come on. If we really want to ask it, who's really shaped the entire planet?
That's what I was getting at with the coral. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's why. But corals are animals, so I mean.
Right, exactly.
Let's see, cows, wolves, dogs. How many here have been shaped by a dog? See? Yeah.
I think we can reveal the answers. I think I kind of screwed that one up because I do believe humans are on there. So.
Oh, good.
So I said human, so I win the crown, right? Okay. Awesome. Okay, Emily. So I want to ask you here, how did large mammals impact biodiversity in the past? And what will change if we lose large mammals?
Well, so aside from what I just said about de-extinction, we know that certainly in some areas, certain large mammals had major impacts on environments. And so there's this whole area of study now called defaunation, which is the research into how a place changes when you take the big animals out of it. So we know in modern experiments in Africa, for instance, when you exclude elephants and wildebeest from an ecosystem, it goes very quickly from being an open grassland savanna to a closed forested shrubby habitat. And this has concomitant effects on the birds, the insects, the nutrient transport, the parasite load, fire regimes, many, many, many other impacts. And so some colleagues and I have been looking in the past and saying, okay, well, how about the last time we had a major slew of large mammal extinctions? Do we see these types of effects? And in some places we do. In northern, in the sort of the Arctic areas, in northern and northeastern United States, we do see areas, and Florida too. I think you can see changes in plant communities that would not be predicted by what was happening in the climate then, and is concurrent with the loss of large, very, very large herbivores from an ecosystem. Also, a study that we're working on in Brazil during this time period. It looks like you see that as well.
And I see gorilla up there, so I wanted to ask Augustine, what non-human primates impact the environment in measurable ways?
I'll answer the question, but let me give a shout out to the person who voted for E. coli, because I think we're giving very short shrift to all the bacteria and microbiota. If you took away every piece of DNA that is human in your body, you would still have 68% of your body's outline based on all the other stuff that lives with you. So let's not forget those. So what other primates have impacted us in many ways? Gorillas, not so much. But a good example for a primate that has had a lot of interface with humans are macaque monkeys. Macaque monkeys live throughout Asia and up to North Africa, and humans and macaques over the last 2 million years have actually spread across a lot of the globe together. And we have not just sort of overlapped ecologically, but we've actually shared pathogens. We have shared back and forth viral, retroviral, and other viruses. You can think about gorillas and chimpanzees having shared particular viruses with humans, the SIV, CPZ group from which HIV comes. But humans and macaque monkeys have not only shared many viruses back and forth, but continue to do so today. Recent work published by my colleagues and myself that we work in are demonstrating that in Southeast Asia today, we have numerous retroviral exchanges between macaque monkeys and humans living in and around the same place. So our bodies and their bodies are being co-shaped mutually as we share space together.
I think that's a good way to move on to our next question, which is related. The question is, name a disease that has been altered by environmental change. And I think it's Augustine's, or we get the 20 seconds first. Yeah. You guys are gonna have the song in your head for days. All right, Augustine.
Malaria,
Nice.
cholera, all right, don't come complaining to me next time you catch cholera.
Zika. Tuberculosis.
Augustine, you want to give it one more guess?
Dengue?
We have the mosquitoes here. So why don't we show the answers?
You guys are better than us. That's actually that. Cancer and asthma are really, really important.
We're going to have to get a lot of crowns for everyone to wear next week.
Good list.
So, Augustine, with warming temperatures, will we see a rise in vector-related viruses and diseases?
Yes,
what
we
can
will.
we expect maybe here in the U.S.?
So we can expect, as we were just having this conversation, right? The Egypti, the Zika-carrying mosquito, is now here in LA County, right? So as environments warm, right, as we move further north with our warming temperatures, but also as environments fluctuate more and certain areas get wetter, we have good data from many parts of the world that absolutely clearly demonstrate that you expand not just the range of existing pathogens, but also the opportunity for pathogens to undergo novel mutation or other evolutionary events and spread. We are going to be seeing many more pathogen outbreaks, some of which might really challenge our ability to adapt.
So why don't we just kill all the mosquitoes? I guess, Emily, I want to ask you, are initiatives to eradicate mosquitoes the answer here?
I don't know. I don't know enough about it. I mean, that's not the answer, I would say, because first of all, you have a lot of different species of insects and other animals that carry disease. So you have fleas that are on prairie dogs, and you have different birds that are carrying things from afar. We have something I learned recently from one of the volunteers here that I didn't know after about 9 months of working here, is we actually have sentinel chickens out here in the park that are monitored by the, I guess, Department of Fish and Wildlife or USDA, they come and they check the chickens every couple of weeks to make sure that there aren't some new animal-borne diseases in. So zoonotic diseases are a problem. And also, I mean, LA, it's the third biggest city in North America. It's visited by, I don't know how many hundreds of thousands or millions of people from around the world. We always have people coming in, bringing new pathogens, bringing new pathogen-carrying organisms. So while I think it's certainly important to work on eradicating certain pathogen-bearing species, it's not going to be a cure-all, and it's not even necessarily possible, and we don't know what the impacts are going to be. And certainly as long as LA is wedded to lawns and golf courses, you're not going to get rid of the mosquitoes.
Get rid of the lawns and golf courses. But let me make a call out to diversity here, just very, very quickly. What Emily pointed out I think is really important. First of all, you're probably not going to get rid of all the mosquitoes no matter how hard you try. You're just going to create really, really, really resistant mosquitoes. But one thing that's really important about humans is that our immune system, like macaque monkeys, is incredibly robust and highly genetically diverse, meaning that because humans have spread so far and wide around the planet, our species has a large pool of variation to draw on to deal with these kinds of interactions. But they only work if we're exposed to a range of challenges. And so becoming very homogeneous, like that asthma issue, the idea of cutting ourselves off, not letting kids roll around in the mud, actually is problematic. Our immune systems have incredible potential, but they need to be primed and challenged with a regular basis.
Great. I'm going to move on to the last question now because I believe we have a lot to talk about here. The last question is, name the most inhospitable climate our species has experienced. It's the last time you're going to hear the song. So Emily's going to answer first.
Sahara Desert. Modern climate. Arctic. High elevation, like the Himalayas or the Andes.
Let me just say that one of my PhD students is studying this right now, and that was on her list, so that I'm going to go with that one. Space. Urban environments.
Can you reveal that number one answer? Let's see some of the other responses. So Emily, I'm going to start with a question for you. How did humans and other mammals adjust to hotter or cooler times?
Well, humans is really Augustine's department, so I don't want to step into that one because I'm sure he's much more knowledgeable. Other animals, how did they respond?
Right, or adjust.
Adjust, how did they adjust? Well, again, so the most popular form of adjustment is to just move to where the climate you like is now. And so something that's interesting about that is for a long time, scientists thought that, every species had a particular set of temperature and precipitation regimes, and also that ecosystems were sort of set, and so a certain suite of plants and animals would all live together in one place, and if the climate changed, that whole suite would pick up and move together to the other place. And something we've discovered by studying the Ice Age and what happened at the end of it is that that's not true. Actually, plants and animals of different species are responding individualistically to specific triggers. And so certain ones are going to move based on, what's the coldest it ever gets. And certain ones are going to move based on what's the driest it ever gets. And certain ones are going to be move based on, how long does it stay above 80 degrees during the summer. And so you see a lot of things moving in different ways for different reasons, and some things are moving in response to other species too. And so we have what's called non-analog communities, where we see in the past groups of plants and animals living together in one place, like the La Brea tar pits, that you do not see, even though all of those species may still be alive, they are not all living together anywhere on Earth today. And so that's something very interesting that we've learned from that.
And it's also important to point out that this critical thing, as Emily just said, moving around and breaking up of communities or moving in different patterns. But in the current landscape of much of the planet, we have so radically and rapidly altered landscapes that movement, in many cases, is no longer possible. So most animals are quite adaptable and able to sort of deal with a lot of changes, except when something happens like 101 running through their environment.
So, speaking of movement, we move as well as humans. And Augustine, in your books and papers, you argue that aggression and violence is not really a hallmark of humans. But what can you tell us about past environmentally driven conflict? Will conflict increase as we track or move to future sustainable and suitable environments if we all move here to LA?
Yes. It's not that I want to point out, I make the case, and I think there's incredibly robust evidence to back this up. Violence and large-scale coordinated aggression is not humans' go-to. That's not what we do in most successful contexts, but we are capable of the most intense, the best coordinated, and the most cruel violence of any organism out there. So I'm not saying it doesn't happen. I'm just saying that's not the sort of unique adaptation that humans have. But what we do know, especially over the last 10,000 years, as we started to settle down, as we started mutually interacting with organisms, other organisms that we call domestication, sort of farming, creating, investing a lot in place, we become more susceptible to climate change, and the difference and the inequality in access to resources becomes more stark, especially when we get storage, especially when we get large-scale economic and political systems. And lo and behold, what do we see in the last 10 to 12,000 years? The first evidence of large-scale coordinated lethal violence, otherwise known as war, increases in patterns and contexts of intergroup and intragroup violence related to resource inequality. The problem is, the worse the challenges of the environment in a context of extreme inequality that we already have globally, the more violence we're going to see. I think you pointed out Arab Spring, and I mean, we can look around the world right now. Food insecurity, social injustice, environmental injustice, almost uniformly can lead to extreme outbreaks of violence. However, we are imaginative, we are collaborative, we are creative. We know how to deal with the inequality. We're not going to get rid of it, but we can manage it both in the context of economic and environmental access to resources. We can do a much better job. But currently, I mean, there looks to be more conflict in the future, not less.
And this is recognized at the highest levels, even in areas where you might think it's not based on the public face. So my understanding is that, and I doubt this has changed, although I don't know, is that for many years, both the Department of Defense and the Department of Homeland Security have had units specifically dedicated to climate security.
That's actually from what I hear, because we have some grants in that area. The DoD has been funding some really interesting climate and human adaptability studies. Those are all on hold now.
I didn't know that.
Big surprise.
So the next question is to both of you, and this comes from, my understanding is this comes from an IOES happy hour after a couple of glasses of wine, with what the happy hour participants wanted you guys to answer is, what is the curveball that Earth might throw at us?
Tipping points. So I think it was in 2004, the number and the frequency and intensity of wildfires in the western United States doubled that year. And you can see the effects of that in Northern California today. And there, when we think of change, especially on long time scales, with the exception of mass extinctions, we tend to think of gradual change. So, it gets a little hotter, maybe you lose one species, you lose another species, maybe, things are slowly shifting, but sometimes it doesn't work that way. Sometimes everything sort of ticks along with very little perturbation, and then all at once you hit a point where everything changes. And those are very hard to predict. There are a lot of smart people in biology and geophysics and modeling simulations trying to work on this, but in fact, Governor Brown read a paper that some colleagues of mine published a few years ago and contacted them directly and asked them to start working on sort of on a governmental level on climate change and tipping points issues, but that is the one big wild card.
Okay.
So I have to say the same thing, and I'll say it slightly differently so it doesn't sound like I'm saying exactly the same thing. I think what's really important, so a lot of the work I've done with colleagues recently is modeling sort of population change, modeling interactions of humans, changing environments, other animals, and pathogens and transmissions. And one thing that both our agent-based and analytic models show us is that there's these unknowns in systems that are very hard to model. Once you get what are called these tipping points or fast ratcheting, the models that we have, you build the model based on what you know. But it turns out there's tons of stuff that we just don't know how systems work given situation X, especially when the situations leading up to that have been changing so rapidly. So one of the places where I've worked in Indonesia, 20 years ago, the entire phenology of this one forest was different. And it responded completely differently to fire. And we had no way of knowing that because we'd never seen the forest in this one composition. And so I think I'm saying the same thing, but what's really important is the curveball the world is throwing at us is the world. We're incredibly arrogant. We think because we have a small grasp on climatological, ecological, and structural patterns on the planet that we know how it actually works. And that's like my colleagues who do great work in neurobiology. We can map the heck out of your brain, but we really can't tell you how it works. And the Earth is a lot more complicated than that.
Thanks. We want to take a moment as we end here to ask you this question once again. Provide one word in your phone. Oh, where'd it go?
Wouldn't be really a talk without a sort of strange thing with PowerPoint.
That describes how you feel when you talk about climate change. So quickly to summarize here as we look at the words move around, I could watch it all day. I want to ask our panelists two final questions in summary when thinking about some of the words you're seeing up here. What is your biggest concern or fear or worry about climate change? Let's start with you, Emily.
It's too late. And because we know there's a lag time from the time that we emit carbon and other greenhouse gases and the time when you really see a response in the Earth's atmosphere and global ecosystems. We know that even if we stopped all carbon emissions today, the world is still going to keep warming for quite some time. And this year especially has been profoundly difficult just in our country, and not to mention a lot of other places. There are a lot of islands that are probably going to disappear, no matter what we do. And the fact that we're not as a
we got
country,
some emojis up here.
On an institutional, nationwide scale, doing everything in our power to put the brakes on is very, very concerning.
Okay, Augustine, same question.
Bikinis, really? Oh well. Anyway, because I work in a intellectual landscape where I'm looking at least the last 2 million years and occasionally the last 14 million years, I don't think it's too late. It might be too late for a lot of species, and it might be too late for a lot of humans, but not all species and not all humans. So my fear is not that it's too late. My fear is that we don't get off our asses and do something. My fear is that we don't take advantage of this amazingly well-documented capacity to create, to collaborate, to coordinate, and to affect change, And if we don't do it now, very soon, then it will be too late. I mean, I think there are plenty of good climate models out there that say that we may be making this planet inhospitable to a large cluster of organisms. We can act, but my fear is that people won't. Everyone's got an iPhone here in the US. Other people have other kinds of things that fill their lives. Some people are just trying to find food for the day. And as long as we have rampant inequality, absolute sort of, I don't know, inaction by so many people with so much power, that's what I'm afraid of.
Okay, and then one final question before we crown our winner of Family Feud Climate Style. What gives you hope as we move forward?
There is incredible will across the world, both at governmental and at major other institutional levels. So while our particular government may not be acting at a federal level right now, a lot of subnational entities are acting. California is a major leader in this. And a lot of corporations, and it's funny because, I mean, you know, as a child in the 80s, I sort of grew up thinking, oh, corporations are bad, corporations, you know, ExxonMobil and big tobacco and whatever, you know, they're greedy and they're going to destroy the planet. And actually, I've, you know, having spent the last 9 years of my life before coming down here in close proximity to Silicon Valley, like, I've sort of come over to the other side. I think corporations might be what's going to save the planet. Like, there is huge, you know, with the recognition that we cannot rely on at least our current federal government to take action, many, many very wealthy and powerful entities are on their own brokering deals and making alliances and making major investments and plans to innovate. And they may very well prove to be more effective and more adaptable than our governmental institutions, and bring about change that way.
Having seen all of the Terminator and Alien movies, I'm just not sure corporations are going to make it for us. But I think you're right. We need to use collaboration with corporate entities now more than ever. But that's not what makes me hopeful. What really makes me hopeful is I interact a lot with kids, with 9-year-olds, with 12-year-olds, with 16-year-olds, with 19-year-olds. And I find that it is so much easier to talk about evolution, to talk about climate change, to talk about sort of what humans are capable of, to talk about health and disease, to talk about sexuality, to talk about race. All of those things are pretty easy to talk about with kids. It's the adults that are big problems because they're stuck in their ways. And I think the possibility of improving education systems and getting people actually doing what they do best, being creative, collaborative, and imaginative, is our great hope. We used to in the United States have the best K through 12 education system in the world. We don't anymore. That's a problem. So it could be a pessimistic approach, or it could be an optimistic approach saying let's invest a ton in K through 12 education.
Great. Now we get to announce our winner. I have it written down right here. We have a score of 26-19. Emily wins. Yes. And the great thing is there are lots of staff here from Brea Tar Pits that can make certain she wears the crown all week.
We need photos every day.
Unfortunately, on Sunday, I'm flying to a conference in Pennsylvania, and I'm not sure
you
people
can
are
wear
going
it
to
there.
understand why I'm talking about.
TSA is going to love that going through.
Michelle said I could only take it off to shower. I'm sorry, TSA.
We really want to thank you for being here. We had a great time doing this, learning from each other, and it's really nice to see all of you here. So I think that concludes our program. We'll be sitting around up here if anyone has some questions and wants to talk to the panelists. But other than that, thank you.